Hey everybody, I'm Reggie Williams, founder and CEO of Ambrosia for Heads, and with me I have Jake Payne, our EIC editor-in-chief, and together this is our What's the Headline podcast. And we are super excited tonight. We got a crazy show dedicated almost exclusively to the verses that we just witnessed. This is hot off the presses. The two of us watched Redman versus Method Man collectively, and we had notes, giving each other smoke throughout. Really just had a great time and looking to really share that with you all. So, what'd you think, man? Overall, like, how does it stack up to verses in general?
Man, I thought it was great. I thought it was great for 420 and that whole festivities, and obviously with what's going on today, just like nationally and internationally, this was the dessert after a crazy day. And there was some messy parts, but there were some reminders, some stark reminders on why these are two of the greatest, performers, MCs, and certainly musicians.
Yeah, man. For me, like, you could see just the chemistry between them.
Yeah.
This was so D'Angelo did a show, and it's the first time we saw someone actually do kind of a performance, right? But this one, even though there was some snafus and everything like that, their chemistry when they were actually performing was flawless. They would alternate between being each other's hype man, filling in lyrics for each other. And I just thought it was great.
Mm-hmm.
So, what were some of your favorite moments of it?
Man, in the whole thing, I gotta go with the EPMD posse moment at the end, which is funny because that's a total diversion from the versus itself. But I had made the comment to you at one point. I'm like, you know what? After the 20 songs, after the 20 rounds, sometimes I feel like these bonuses can get a little bit sloppy. And just to bring out the posse like that for Red and Hit Squad and have Meth participate, like you said, doing the hype man, that was a highlight for me for a litany of reasons. And then you had, Meth up there with RZA and Capadonna and Inspectah Deck. It's a reminder that these guys are part of bigger family trees that embrace each other. So that was great. Yeah, what about you?
Yeah, man. I mean, so Headbanger is the first time I ever experienced Redman.
Okay.
That song and it was a standout performance, right? It was like, to me, it was like Buster on Scenario. It was like
Nas and Main Source, or
Big Pun on John Blaze. You had Nas Main Source. Like, it was that standout performance that really established him as a special MC, someone to watch. And so seeing that live, I don't think I've ever seen that perform live before. It was amazing. And you talked about some of the subtext there too, because there's been some back and forth over the years between some of the members, but tonight it was just all love and celebration.
yeah, to me, and I've always wondered, DJ Scratch, huge shout outs to him. I think he added a lot of great energy to tonight with Red and with Meth. And did some, when there were snafus, did some things that really kept the party going and hyped up the verses long before, Reggie or Meth hit the stage. But, he has not been on, he's been on the outs with EPMD in recent years, just based on what's on Twitter. And from what my understanding, so to see him, Eric Parrish was great. And then with this whole thing with, Redman's Muddy Waters 2, which he's been promoting now for what feels like a decade. I know, and you and I think, talked with Eric about it. There's been some kind of debate of what involvement Eric Sermon would have, because obviously Redman is a great producer in his own right, produced a lot of his own great records. And then you've got Rockwilder and other folks in the camp. So to see Eric and Reggie sharing the stage together amid COVID, amid quarantine, when it's so easy for folks not to be there, was just a dope moment.
Yeah, they brought out tons of guests, man. So they
Yeah.
had Keith Murray, who looked great, like,
Yeah.
as good as he's looked in a long time. He did, Get Lifted. I know it was one of your favorite. RZA, Inspectah Deck, like you said. Do It All from Lords of the Underground came out.
That
And
was a highlight.
that was a highlight. And it was cool because they really used the platform,
Mm-hmm.
So for Do It All, they let him come out and announce the fact that he is running for, what is it?
Councilman, I believe.
Councilman of Newark. I think it's West West Councilman or something like that. But great platform for him. They each promoted their own products that are coming out. Meth has got like a couple strains of weed, it seems. Redman.
Yeah, he is a store. Who knew?
Yeah, and exactly. Yeah, look, it looks amazing too. Like the product looks amazing. Redman promoting, like you said, Muddy Waters 2. He announced that they're putting out Blackout 3, which was a surprise to Meth.
Yeah, Meth confirmed he's got a joint with Havoc producing, which I believe AFH was one of the first places to report. So just a lot of cool news and tidbits. And what was the other one too? Oh, a RZA solo album produced by DJ Scratch.
Yeah, and they gave a shout out to Fife with his project and encouraged people to go out and buy Nutshell, the single, to give him a gold single tonight, and just the power of this platform. You could see something like that happen. They brought out a lot of legends. They brought K Solo out. We talked about that. They had DJ Kool, Let Me Clear My Throat. It was just a celebration.
Yeah.
A really great night. So one of the things that I took note of is that this one, these guys being such great friends and performing together for so long and having that kind of chemistry on stage, it wasn't clear whether it was going to be a competition or a friendly celebration. And Ray and Ghost obviously have performed. They share a lot of similarities, performed together and been on record together. But they made it clear from the outset that it was going to be a competition. Would you say this was a competition or a performance, a joint performance?
I think it was more of a joint performance, and that that carried itself out in structure. I think you and I have score sheets, but there were times where we weren't sure of what was happening. There was a break in the middle, which has happened with other verses. But if you go by our count, there was a break in that. And then, even down to like the fluidity of the performance into the bonus cuts, it was just a concert. And you got to think, I mean, now that the Roots are with Fallon, I don't know if KRS-One is performing as frequently as he once used to, like even pre-COVID. These are two of the hardest working guys in hip hop and in all of music. And what they said at one point in the show is they usually do 2 shows in Colorado for this smokers holiday. So for them to have an opportunity, really one of the only opportunities of the level to put on a proper hip hop show like this. Yeah, that's what it seemed like. And you know what it reminded me a lot of was the performances on Yo MTV Raps, just having the structure with the DJ in the back and then having the handheld camera on stage and them rapping to the camera while kind of walking in motion. I don't know. I mean, you lived through the Yo MTV era more than I did, but did you kind of get that vibe a little bit?
Yeah, you know what? I didn't think of it until you said it, but now that you say it, like it was very much like that. I mean, the background was much more elaborate. I thought that the big screen was cool with the graffiti and the images of neighborhoods and like bodegas and stuff like that. I thought that was really, really dope. But you're right, in terms of like the setup and the performance, it did feel kind of like those days of Yo MTV Raps. And you talk about them being hardworking. They said from the outset they were not going to sit down. They didn't sit down a single time, and Redman had smoke. They both had smoke because apparently there's some jokes about their age.
Yeah.
But those dudes like worked as hard as anybody I've seen, and like are both like in great shape too. Like
a lot of people coming out of COVID, with spare tires around their bellies, and I was texting with some friends, and these guys look as physically fit as they have in my opinion, in the last 20 years.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Meth has definitely been hitting the weights. I saw a Men's Health video of his workout and fitness routine. He's really, really, really putting in the work. And Redman never ever gains weight. It's crazy. So you said you think it was a performance. I would agree with you, but I would say there was a little bit of subtext, right? Reggie comes out with a T-shirt that says Reggie. Then what does it say? It said Reggie, Jay-Z, Tupac, and Biggie, right? Like those are his goats, and in that order. So he's putting himself at the top of the list. I didn't see Meth on the T-shirt. You know what I mean?
Well, wait, correct me if I'm wrong, but that shirt was a reference to Eminem's lyrics, right?
It is.
Yeah.
I'm saying he chose to wear it.
Word.
On this night, you know what I mean? So like, even though they're friends, and it was a friendly thing. I think that the MCs always have a competitive spirit about it. It's the essence of hip hop.
Yeah, and I mean, Red in particular, you and I at Ambrosia have documented. I mean, he came up as a battle MC. Unfortunately, that era of like 88 to 90 is not documented with like video and audio. We would benefit so much from today, but there's epic stories of Do It All as well as Bismarcky running around with Red and having him battle people. And with Meth, I would imagine, there's some history there too of him squaring up with folks.
Right. So it was friendly and all love, but in the spirit of hip hop, I think you and I are gonna do a little scoring, right? Because
Word.
why not? It is what it is, man. And barbershops is gonna go down, so it's going down here tonight.
Before we do that, let me throw you a question just for context, because I still see people leaving comments when I went on here a year and change ago and said that DJ Premier, was like my hip hop hero. And so, I mean, going into this, between the two guys, is there one that you listen to more than the other?
You know, I thought that there was, but like after tonight, and I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah.
Um, I realize it's much more even than I realized, and in fact, it might tilt uh, the opposite way that I thought it did.
Okay.
But I'll say this: I've been huge fans of both of these guys, and in fact, this might be for me the most balanced battle in terms of like how much of a fan I am of both MC. And that's not saying that obviously like, in each one I've been fans, but I'm saying like I'm a super fan of both of these dudes.
Yeah.
You know, and given what we do and how much of a favorite each one is for our audience, I've really immersed myself in their catalogs very deeply for the last several years. So I listen to both pretty regularly. How about you?
Same. I mean, it's neck and neck. I think as a kid, I came into being a fan of Redman first. I'm not sure of that. But I mean, Def Squad, you only get one album, and with Wu Tang, you get all these albums. So I think it's a neck and neck. And the other question I wanted to ask you too, and I always think there's things I don't know, but I mean, any personal connections to either or both of these guys through the course of your career?
Yeah, a few. I know it's a rhetorical question on your part, but I'll go ahead. So, Meth. The first time I had a connection with him, I interviewed him for AFH, and I'll never forget it. It was to support his Tommy Boy project, the Meth Lab, the first one, and it was over the phone. He was on set in New Orleans doing something. I can't even remember what the project was that he was on, and it was blazing hot outside. And because I can't remember why, but it fell at a time where I had to do it in my car. And so I did it in the car, and I didn't want like the New York noise, which is constant, to interfere. And so I had the windows rolled up because I figured we might want to use the audio recordings. Actually, one of
Yeah.
the first audio recordings. And dude, when I tell you, I was sweating profusely. I mean,
Yeah.
like greasy, like just greasy. Like I didn't have any water. Like it was crazy. But the conversation was so engaging, and I'd only expected to get like 15 minutes or so, and it gave me like close to an hour. It was a really great conversation. And I think that I can I think I can say that he's been a supporter and a fan of ours because of that, and just the way we've covered the culture for quite some time. And so that was really great. And then I got to meet him in person backstage at A3C a couple years ago when Wu Tang closed out the night, and that was great too. And like he showed a lot of love that night. And so Redman, I had been chasing for quite some time because I have a show idea and still want to do the show with him, which I think would be gangbusters. But finally connected with him. Actually, Kevin Lyles, shout out to Kevin Lyles, who they shouted out tonight, and
Quite a
the
bit.
rest of the Def Jam executives, because it was their idea for putting those two dudes together on a tour, and that's what formed this lifelong bond that they've had. But Kevin connected me with James Ellis, who actually is the manager for both Redman and Method Man, and they shouted him out quite a bit. They referenced him quite a bit tonight. And so I talk. I actually I met Redman at at South by Southwest. He did a show at Bum Rush the Stage. You know, he's like you said in the DMX video we did. I'm not shy when it comes to like when
No.
especially when I'm repping for AFH. I'm gonna go hard.
Yeah.
You know? So I met Redman. Talked to him afterwards. Talked to him about how much I wanted to work with him. Got a picture with him, which was really dope. He connected me with James Ellis too. And then we started like just talking, and we've had a number of phone calls and just like really connected that way too. So feel like I've had some meaningful interactions with both, which have only just further solidified my respect and admiration for them. But what about you?
Yeah, I early on in my career, 2002 or 3, I can't tell you for sure, when I was very new and green, working with all hip hop, interviewed Method Man, and he was the first hip hop artist that ever sunned me. I mean, I've had some cringeworthy moments in my career where, you ask the wrong thing or you might upset an artist by accident. I pissed Meth off. And you know what? That was a total reflection of me and preparedness. At the time, this was before Spotify and all the streaming platforms. And I didn't own Judgment Day to Cal 2000. And I was asking him questions about that album. And I even quoted a verse because I could find lyrics online that wasn't his. It was Street Life's, who also appeared tonight. And Meth put me in my damn place. I mean, I was 18 years old, and I never forgot that. And then through AFH, I connected with him most recently in 2017 or 18. And he couldn't have been nicer. And he was a huge fan, as you said, of our platform, out of his way supporter of AFH, and had an incredible conversation with him. And I reminded him of that in passing. And he was like, oh man, those were weird times in my life. And I wasn't feeling the press so much back then. And it was a nice bookend. And as far as Red, more so, I've spent time in person with Red. We actually had a really amazing conversation, and around 2009 or 10 in Jay-Z's office at Def Jam. Jay had just stepped away, left Def Jam, and top floor, beautiful like penthouse office suite, and we were just kicking it at the pool table. And I got a great interview with him, and he was extremely complimentary, to the point when the interview was over, Red was like, yo man, kick it, which meant a lot to me at the time. And I've always found him to be incredibly gracious. So and at least through social media platforms, another great supporter of AFH, which, as hard as you and I work at this, that always means a lot.
Yeah, man. There's that saying that you never want to meet your heroes, but it's not really true. A lot of
Yeah.
times, these guys are really, really, charming, engaging, charismatic, cool people. And if you show them the respect that they deserve and do your homework,
Yeah.
especially if you do your homework when you're doing an interview, I think that they repay that because they respect and appreciate that you study too. So I'm glad you had that moment to kind of like turn things around with that.
Valuable lesson, man. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, shout out to both of those guys. Okay, so without further ado, do you want to talk a little bit about the first round?
Method Man versus Redman. Here we go. First round. This is for all my smokers versus how to roll a blunt. I had that one um, as a tie. You know, for me, it was an interesting way to start out. Both have bigger records,
Mm-hmm.
but they started off like early in the catalog and really just like taking it slow, like pacing. And I'm not sure how much of this, at least early in the catalog for Red, I'm not sure how much of this was their sequencing versus DJ Scratch.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
But I thought it was an interesting choice to start. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a 420 theme, like, and let's not forget, I mean, there's folks out there, and I think this is a testament to both artists' audiences. There's folks out there that probably can't name 3 songs from each tonight that are tuning in. I mean, this is an event, and if you're part of cannabis culture, this is what you do. And there's a reason why I think this is the first versus in quite some time that's, in a Tuesday night. So it was a fitting way to start. I believe, we both agreed this was a tie, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good point about I completely like forgot it was 420, maybe too much but
Yeah.
yeah, but that's true. Like so the second one is when it started getting interesting. How did you score that one?
So, it's there's times where a record that you don't expect will win you over. And that I feel like that's true of just old classic concert going. So Meth went first and he went with What the Blood Clot. It's a Cal deep cut, in my opinion. And I didn't expect that. And I believe Meth even said I didn't anticipate performing this song necessarily tonight. But here we go. And he went up against Redman Hardcore. Hardcore is the song that, I know through and through. I've listened to it, for much of my adult life, and even, as a teenager, preteen. Um, but I had to give it up to Meth. I thought his performance, and there was a few times this happened tonight where the lesser record was outperformed. And I also thought right away, like, okay, this isn't going to be textbook. You guys aren't just going to run through the hits. So, I mean, it's not definitively, but I chalked it up to Meth, and you went.
So okay, before I answer, I want to know generally, were you ranking these based on performance or on record?
Record absolutely ties in, but I thought, Meth is a top level performer, as is Red. And I thought that Meth performed the song and made the moment feel special, especially coming off of round one, where neither one of those songs are my joints, pun intended. And so this was an opportunity. And I thought that Meth really kind of put his back into it with What the Blood Clot. So I went there. And but there are times where it's head to head. And you and I talked about a lot of this with Ray and Ghost, where, the record is the tipping point.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say for me, generally, I ranked based on the record, not the performance. There were a
Okay.
couple exceptions, and I'll get into that when we talk about it. But generally, I based it on the record. But interestingly, in most instances, not all, but in most, they just rap the instrumentals,
Yeah.
which is crazy because these records they went so deep in their catalog for some of them. I don't know when they would have last performed them, and even if they're performing them regularly, like you said, it's not like they had been performing in a year anyway. So like to remember all those records is pretty impressive.
I've seen these guys a bunch. I don't think I've ever seen them without each other performing, that I can remember, at least on the solo level. I don't think I've ever seen Meth perform What the Blood Clot. So, hardcore is a joint in in Redman's catalog. So, it would have made sense to maybe do like a Release Yourself, or, there's other songs that make sense stacked up against this. But again, it's one of those things where you don't expect to see it. They do it, in my opinion, very well, and I'm going to honor that. And it's interesting how our approaches differ a little bit.
Yeah, so I would go with hardcore
Okay.
because I like that record better.
Incredible record.
And what the album obviously was like a huge like introduction for Reggie, like in terms of a full body of work. So like important record on a very important album for him. So
As
uh,
an aside, would you say that's your favorite Red solo album?
no, I wouldn't say that. It's hard for me to pick. Like I like There Is a Dark Side a lot, and I know that's one that a lot of heads don't gravitate toward. But for me, Can't Wait is just incredible, and like some really dark records on that. I love that. And then Muddy Waters is a big one for me too. But what about you?
Yeah, Muddy Waters was my intro. And it's funny because There Is a Dark Side, I hear a lot of hip hop heads talk about that. And I've actually spoken to Red about it. And, you don't hear about this a lot in hip hop, but it's one of those albums that he doesn't love revisiting because it wasn't weed that he was doing during that album. It was heavier stuff. And it was a very dark, confusing time in his life. And it shows itself in the music. And I've always tried to get huge into that album, and I've bought it numerous times and then traded it in back when that was a thing. That's not my favorite. I veer back and forth, believe it or not. between What the Album and Docs the Name 2000, which was, late 90s, I'll Be That Redman. So it's totally different. But that's why I asked, because recently I played What the Album and I was like, man, this is Red's finest hour for me. But that could totally change, as it often does for hip hop heads.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So so far it was tie in round one, and you scored Method Man round two. I scored
Mm-hmm.
Redman round two. So sounds like we're even right now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so third round, shame on Wu-Tang versus Can't Wait. Woo. I mean, dude, like whenever I heard songs, typically, I hear the one song and I already know how I'm gonna score it. And so I'd had it down that I was gonna do Shame on, and
Yeah.
then Can't Wait, one of my favorite Redman songs of all time. So I had to, I couldn't go against that record, but again, how can I go against that classic Wu record? So that one was a tie, and I think it's around that time that you had you said I had more ties than who?
Then I'm gonna change it to Men's Warehouse now, but I said Joseph A. Banks.
Right, right.
No, that's fine. I think we're always allowed a few ties, and it was happening a lot at the top. I can't wait, I can't wait. And it was close to me, but I didn't want to throw two ties in the first three rounds. And I thought that Red, I said it before about Meth. I thought Red performed this one a little bit better, so I gave him the edge up.
And I said, this is Hagler versus Hearns. It's a close fight. It's okay if these dudes tie in a bunch of rounds. That was my take. But anyway.
Word. So next up was React, Red's joint with Eric Sermon, and versus Dangerous Ground by Meth, which I believe was on the Tikal 2000 album. So you and I, for the first time, not counting a tie, agreed on this one. Which was it?
Shadow boxing. Yeah, I mean,
excuse me. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, shadow boxing, right? You changing your score? You changing your
No,
mind?
no. I jumped ahead to the next round. You'll have to pardon me on I went to the round after that. Yeah, shadow boxing on the Jizza feature, excuse me, versus 1212 on the Meth
Yeah,
and Red. But
yeah.
we did agree on this one, and it was Liquid Swords all day.
Shadow boxing. Okay, so next round, like you said, React versus Dangerous Ground. We both agreed on that one too, and it was Redman, React. So, all right, so we're still tied up. You and I are still dead even on this one so far. So
Yep.
after that, we went to What I'm Gonna Do Now from Redman's Malpractice album, and then YOU, which was a joint Meth and Red one. And so let's talk about that for a second. So how did you score generally records that were joint Redman and Method Man records?
It got a little bit murky. And in a case like this, I kind of went off of the performance for each. And I wasn't, the fact that they were together on something didn't give it a tipping point. I think if they were on, both songs, that kind of validated a tie at certain places. But again, this one was a little bit tricky. Did you approach it any different?
It was hard for me. What I tended to do, and I did that on this one, was if it was a joint record and I really liked both performances, then I typically gave it a tie regardless of what the other record was that was competing.
Mm-hmm.
So this one I gave a tie because I thought on YOU they both like just smashed it, and and so I gave them both a point on that one.
Yeah, and I can support that. One thing I will say, and I on this one I did go Method Man, with YOU as well. What I think is interesting, and we've seen this more and more as Versus has progressed, they've really spread out their catalogs. I mean, here you are 6 rounds in by my count, and you've got features, you've got gaps of more than 10 years from the stuff that they're doing, from early to late. They're really mixing it up, and I thought that DJ Scratch did a really interesting job with a lot of these records. There was a moment of guessing. He would play the samples into the song sometimes. He would do different kind of cold starts. It was engaging, and yes, as we've said a couple of times, there are technical difficulties, but I think you've got to, reward the originality there.
Yeah, and speaking of Scratch, like shout out to him for holding it down once again. Like I thought his warm up set was great, really sets the tone. And then this time, I don't recall if he did this last time, but this time doing the interludes in between, the soulful interludes with like Curtis Mayfield and
Luther, yeah.
Luther, yeah, and George Benson was really great. Just reminding how much soul music is integrated in hip hop.
There's one thing Scratch did that I didn't love, and I'm just gonna keep it a bean. And it made me wonder if he had a lot of involvement on both playlists. He played a lot of the joints that he did for these guys, and a lot of those happened on the Blackout albums. And let me say it here: Scratch, phenomenal producer. I mean, I think it was Kool that said he's a grand master at the turntables. Undisputed facts. And joints for LL, Busta. I can go on and on. But I have to say that some of the things that Scratch has done for Red and Meth are not my favorite, and a lot of those were not singles. So I noticed at about the first half of the battle, somewhere in there of the verses, Scratch was favoring things he had done, and that was cool. But I think that's something that could have been scaled down a bit.
Yeah, I'll say it's interesting because I think track selection does play a huge role in this. And I think that's probably why my initial assessment of how I was gonna be scoring this was thrown off, was because I probably expected a very different set of records.
Mm-hmm.
One interesting thing is that for the most part, they kept the selections to their own material, either solo or group or together. And in instances where they had feature records, it tended to be records that from that really kind of helped to put them on. So like
Mm-hmm.
Headbanger and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it there were a couple exceptions to that, but if you think about like both both guys, but especially Meth, he has so many features that he could have done 60 features.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And but neither one really did that, and so it changed up the dynamic a little bit. But so next up was Whatever Man versus the Riddler, and for that one, we both scored at Redman. I mean, that is just such just a classic record, man. Wow, it's one of my top 5 Redman records.
Oh, easily top 3 for me. It takes me back to 1996 anytime I hear it. Blues Brothers is one of my favorite films of all time. So the video was a big jump off to, his personality. And yeah, I love that song. When they played it first, I didn't want to write anything on the scorecard because I thought that would be disingenuous to Mr. Meth. But in my mind, I was like, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a Bring the Pain or something to talk me out of this. And yeah, we did both agree.
Yeah, exactly. So
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So after that, one of the things I wanted coming into this was the Def Squad album, which I think that it is a very satisfying listen almost 25 years after it came out. I'm a fan of all 3 of those guys. I've talked about it on the show, but being 14 or 13 at the time when they made Rapper's Delight or remade it, gave me a huge education and an appreciation for late 70s, early 80s rap. And I'm forever grateful. And then shortly thereafter, they came out with El Nino. And even though the title of that album might have been hella topical at the time, it's aged very well. So to watch the next round, Red do Full Cooperation from the Def Squad album, I love that. And then Meth did Break Up to Make Up with D'Angelo.
And this is where you came with the smoke. Go ahead, say it publicly. Say it publicly.
Yo, I love D'Angelo. Seen him in concert with you. I think that it's his worst rap collaboration. I just never liked that song. And to be 100% truthful, I love Tikal so much. I did. It was, I bought it shortly after it came out. The second Tikal has always been more of an acquired taste for me. And that joint, people love it. I struggle with it. And then on top of it, you hear me out here fanning out for Full Cooperation. So you know which way I'm leaned.
Jake Payne does not like R&B, ladies and gentlemen. Like it's It's documented. It's a fact. I know you try and like slide in Alexander O'Neal and like other dancers once in a while, but it's a rare exception, man. Well, in any case,
Yeah.
since I don't have your cooperation, when I heard full cooperation, I did exactly what you were tempted to do the last round. I put a score, a check in the box for Redman on that one.
Yeah.
But then when Meth came out, breakups to makeup. So all I need is obviously the big song that Meth gets props for the romantic side. But Red said that he didn't have songs for the ladies there, but Meth's got tons and tons of songs for the ladies. That's part of his catalog. And
Yeah.
he said he was a sex symbol too. It's funny. And I think I heard a lot of swoons when Meth took his t-shirt off. But so for me though, breakups to makeups is underrated as a hip hop love song. It's not
Okay.
mentioned, in the same breath as All I Need and like I Need Love and Silent Treatment and things like that. But for me, it's an all-time great like hip hop love song, and I beg to differ. I disagree strongly about D'Angelo's performance on it. I think it's soulful, and the way it's done is very subtle. It almost sounds like a sample instead of a performance. And I think a lot of times when you have a singer on it, it kind of overpowers the record to take over it. But this one is very well integrated for me. So I think it's a great record. So I had to give
Yeah.
it a tie. I gave it a tie because Full
Yeah.
Cooperation is amazing also. But I love breakups to makeups.
And that's a really good point of his voice being like a sample. He did some work on I forget which of the tracks. It might be the Cold World remix. But early on in his career, D'Angelo has a credit with GZA, and it's the same thing, as I recall, of just like he treated that voice like an instrument. So, there you go, boom, 3-4 years later.
Yeah.
So next up we have Big Dogs, another collaboration between the two versus Mind Made Up, the Tupac All Eyes on Me joint that they featured on. And I thought that was interesting that there weren't a lot of stories in this one, especially compared to other verses. But they made a point on this stage to break down something that you and I covered on Ambrosia, and it existed in the annals of hip hop, but is also worth being said is that that song started out as a Dog Pound record. Pac came out of prison in 95, and when all the death row producers were kind of erasing their tracks and giving joints to Pac, including Dre, including Daz, everyone else, that was one. And the version that they made, Inspectah Deck was on. And even Meth was like, you can find it on YouTube, which was dope, especially with Deck there. And then later, some of the props that Meth gave Deck in particular as they performed, I think it was Triumph later on.
Yeah. So which one? How'd you score?
So for this one, I think we agreed. We just tied. It was both joints with both artists. I didn't feel like one performance stood out from the other. I think we both just said this one's a draw, right?
We said it was a draw, but my understanding, at least the way I voted, was that it was for Mind Made Up.
Okay. I think it's a little funny on our sheet then.
Yeah, for me, it was for Mind Made Up.
Okay.
Obviously both are on that record, and
Yeah.
we both have like amazing verses, and so I gave them both a point for that.
I see what you're saying. Okay, word. Interesting. Yeah, and that makes sense because that's the record I bond with and know inside out a lot more than Big Dogs. One thing I'll say that I never understood, and they didn't address it tonight, and it may have been one of those things that's lost in translation or they didn't talk about it. But I feel like when there was a previous conversation and we covered it on AFH, I feel like Lady of Rage was on that joint as well. And she did not make All Eyes on Me. And I feel like she was another artist that was taken off, which was interesting because if I'm not mistaken, I think Scratch played Afro Puffs during the break, and I thought of that too.
Yeah, he did, and I think he actually played it the last set he did too.
Okay, word.
I think I remember that because it's such a hard record. I always get crazy when I hear it, and that's the last time I heard it. But next round, we go to Wu-Tang Clan, Ain't Nothing, and that song. Interestingly, there was no competition for it. They didn't play a second song.
They went in a break, right?
They went on a break afterwards, but that's when RZA came out for the first time. And you said RZA brought the ruckus.
Yo, yeah, RZA brought the energy, and that's great to see. I mean, he was just like there. He was geared up, and to me, that song is one of the great RZA verses. I mean, he sets it off, and I know we all talk about RZA, the producer and the Abbott, but he was a great MC, especially on that first Woo album, and it was just great, to see him. And that's where we learned that, him and Scratch are working on something that they made over quarantine. And I should say, and this sounds like a bragathon, but since Red and Meth, we're all about plugs tonight. RZA's been very, very supportive of AFH as well.
Yeah, yeah, and supportive of his crew too. Like I really love the fact that both for this one and for Ghost and Ray,
Yeah,
Wu came out.
yeah,
Wu came out. Like, and these guys have been through a lot together, a lot of years together, but there's that bond, and they still come out to support each other. So that I thought that was pretty amazing. So we got a break after that. Scratch picked it up once again, and they come out just firing.
yeah.
It was the what versus pick it up, and you said blend, and for me, the what may be my favorite Method Man verse of all time. Like it just is the whole song. I mean, he and Biggie, like, yeah, that's the thing too, right? Like you think about history and like sliding doors moments, and you know, given the performance of that record, I could have easily seen Big and Method Man doing an entire solo album and touring together on it, and then maybe having several. So would Method Man and Redman have even happened? If that had occurred. But I thought so. I had to give it to Meth on that one.
Yeah, I did as well. Pick It Up is a great Redman song. It's one that I listened to a lot at this chapter in my life. Scratch, I forget what he used as an instrumental, but it wasn't the record one. He made a blend with it, if I'm not mistaken. And again, it didn't add value to it, in my opinion. And for reasons you just stated, I was like, the what wins. I mean, that's like being dealt three aces. So you're good money with that.
Yeah. Okay. So what was next?
The Round and Round, and you said the remix with John L.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
versus one of Redman's greats, and they were clowning each other about this, one of his lady records, which was in the series, but Superman Lover 3. And he said that, Funk Flex was a huge proponent, huge supporter of this record, which I didn't realize, not growing up in the tri-state. And I thought, you talk about the great moments of the night. I thought this performance was one of the better moments of the versus itself, especially one that doesn't involve any guests or surprises. Red, he he went full superhero theme, put the cape on, and got low for it, and really played the song up. And what I have to say about that is, Superman Lover was a cool series. I'm not the biggest fan of series. I love EPMD. The Jane records were never the ones I gravitated towards, but it was a case of he sold me this record and made like tomorrow I'm going to listen to it 3 times because of the way he performed it tonight, which is again a great quality of concerts, of hip hop, and certainly of verses.
Yeah, this one hurt me, man. I'm gonna be honest. This one hurt
Yeah.
me. Like that Round and Round remix is just so crazy. Like
Yeah.
I love that song. Like it
Okay.
takes me back to a very specific era in New York. It is just, it's Nels, it's like Cheetah, it's like, man, I love that record. And Matt, just his verse is so incredible. And if we were going on records, I would go with that one. And
Mm-hmm.
but like you said, man, that performance by Redman, you could see the energy shift in the building. Like, that's when people actually got hyped in the crowd. Redman had been employing people to give them some more
Yeah.
energy, but the energy was off the charts for that. And Matthew was giving them energy, and like the whole James Brown with the cape thing, like you said, was just amazing. That was one of my two favorite moments of the entire night, that and Headbangers. So I had to give it to Red on that one.
You make a really interesting point about the crowd, and there were a couple times tonight where I felt that these guys were done an injustice by not having what we're used to. And it's funny too, because up until the very end, I couldn't get a sense of how many people were actually in that room. Was it 100? Was it 200? Was it 25? And there's a couple times I got to see the crowd, and it wasn't a lot. It actually, a couple points, and that being one, sounded like more than it looked like. But there were a few times their banter on stage, even in between songs, and just the element that I've seen these guys able to produce before a live audience wasn't achievable. And you can't fault them for it. But I have to imagine for both of these guys as performers that I don't think they've probably done a virtual concert before. That has to be really jarring. And I liken it to, going to see a comedy in a theater. And, I remember I went in high school with my friends to see Kings of Comedy, and it was empty. We went and caught an early matinee on like a Thursday, and no one was in there. And I wish I would have seen it in a packed theater where everyone was laughing, because you feed off of that energy. So I'll say all that to say, I think it's incredible how they did where you can't feed off of that.
Yeah, man, it's always been a hallmark for me seeing performers early in their career. Like I saw Dizzy Wright like this.
Mm.
I saw an artist named LG, who I'm a huge supporter of from New Orleans, like this, where it's a crowd of 5 or 10 people, and in one instance, it's like it was raining, but the person is performing like it's Madison Square Garden sold out. You would never know that it was like 5 or 10 people in the crowd. Like that to me is the makings of a superstar. And to see these guys give the kind of energy that they did in what's basically an empty Apollo theater, had to be echoing in there, is amazing and a testament, like you said, to who they are as performers and as artists. So next round was "Gonna Love Me" by Tiana Taylor, the remix.
Mm-hmm.
I've made a point of pointing out that it was a Ghost and Ray joint, but he finally got his verse on it. I remember the video was amazing because it paid homage to um, Meth and Mary, too, and the song was so great, and it was a big one for us. And then it was against Serial. It was versus Serial Killer. So for that one, I gave it as a tie, but for Serial Killer, since both Meth and Red are on that for Blackout. So how about you?
Yeah, I mean, same way. And I know I said that, I'm not the biggest listener or supporter of Tikal 2000. I just went back last week, and it's just an album that doesn't stick to my ribs. That being said, I mean, the next year or year half after, they came with the Blackout album. The first one I love. I just thought, and that was one of the joints that I thought really showcased their chemistry at that point. And I love the performance tonight and all of that. And then, that objectively, I always cringe a little bit at the Gonna Love Me remix, because that was a case where you and I disagreed. Um, in our days of publishing Ambrosia every day, I didn't see that remix as a priority the way you did. And I will say right now, you were right.
Thank you. I appreciate
Yeah, you were 100% right,
it. Yeah, and it's interesting that he pointed out too, because that was the angle that I used, was that it was him rhyming on that track, for
Yeah.
the first time. So that was cool. It was cool that it meant something to him too. So
The next one was kind of interesting because these are two recent songs. On the Meth Tip is Squad Up, which was a song that's been around for over 2 years. It blew up on Ambrosia in, I believe, early 2019, and it's Street Life, Method Man on a Havoc beat. And Street Life hit the stage for this versus Nutshell Part 2, which you just mentioned. It is the Phife Dawg record featuring Redman and Busta Rhymes. So both of these guys are kind of showing you now what they've done recently. And I thought that was interesting. And you and I disagreed on this one.
yeah, and I'll point out, I felt bad on this one because, like you said, Street Life came out. He's been, he and Meth have been connected for years. He's had several of his own projects. He's had Meth on a lot of his projects and vice versa. And this was his moment to get like a really big platform. And there was a snafu where the record was playing Meth's vocals during his part. I think it was Meth's vocals, but I'll say that to me, I can understand how he would be frustrated, but for me, like I could hear his vocals clearly, and I thought he performed well,
Yeah.
and handled it well, and Scratch tried to drop out the volume periodically. So to me, it was still a good look for Street Life. But for that one, I gave it to Nutshell just because I love that record. They shouted out Fife, and like I said, they challenged people to give Fife a gold record. And it's at that moment, and I had to give it to Nutshell, not because of the snafu, but because of just the record. So yeah,
Yeah, and that's where we differ. I just had, apples to oranges. I prefer the meth joint.
yeah,
Nutshell's on our playlist right now too. So,
yeah. That's right. That's right.
but buy it. Let's get Fife a gold plaque.
Yeah, Busta Rhymes on that track too. It's a dope
Yep.
track.
So then we started to continue to raise the stakes. They really in the last kind of quarter here finished strong. Grand finale. Meth reminded folks that's on the Belly soundtrack versus what might be my favorite Redman song, "Time for Some Action."
Well,
Oh
actually,
no, excuse me.
yeah,
Four, three, two, one.
yeah,
Yeah,
4, 3,
sorry.
2, 1. So on that one, 4, 3, 2, 1. I mean, I ran it back quite a bit over the last few weeks because
Yeah,
of X, and this was a moment where this whole section became kind of a tribute to Fife and DMX. And you skipped ahead, but it's no spoiler that grand finale was in the next round. So
yeah.
they doubled up on the X verses, which I thought was really dope. One of the things that Scratch pointed out that I thought was amazing. I'd like to go back and check this, but I couldn't think of anyone else off the top of my head. But he said that Meth is the only person who has a verse with Biggie, Pac, and DMX. Three phenomenal, legendary artists that we've lost. It's pretty crazy. That was a powerful statement. But for me, um, I gave it to a tie because both Red and Meth are on 4, 3, 2, 1,
Hmm.
and so for me that was a tie for that record.
Yeah, for me, being less, I feel a little bit uncomfortable with so many ties. So I went all out 4, 3, 2, 1. And that joint, they're both great, but that one I was like, let me give it to this.
Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, to Scratch's point, I can't think if X worked with anyone from Bone Thugs off the top of my head, but that is a tremendous testament to Method Man on that.
yeah, for sure. So next up we had Bring the Pain versus Time for Some Action. One of Jake's favorite songs. For me, that's one of my favorite Meth records, Bring the
Hmm.
Pain, and so I gave it to Meth.
Hmm.
I love Time for Some Action also, but Bring the Pain was one of my joints.
Yeah, it was mine too. I think this is just pound for pound, record to record, one of the most exciting, and it really makes sense. It's a great lineup, and even though I jumping the gun, I said "Time for Some Action" might be my favorite Red song. "Bring the Pain" took the cake too, and I really looked at both of their performances. And Meth, this was one of his high points. I'm sure he's performed the song as much as any he's ever done, so that's what got it for me.
Yeah, he was high. He was doing the Meth dance. I mean, like he really brought it, and he had great energy the whole night. They both did, but there were some times when they took it to a whole different level, and this was one of them for sure.
Next up, man, "Release Your Delf," which was all the slang in the '90s. I remember that, just like versus "I'll Be That," which is two joints from different eras, different parts of the '90s, and this was a case where, as much as I love the Takao joint, I went with Red. His performance really sold it, and I thought, that's a record I love because the sound of hip hop was changing a bit, and Funk Doc adapted right into it. And I think that is another, of his top three. Whatever Man, Time for Some Action, and I'll Be That are probably my three Redman solo joints.
Yeah, I'll Be That is also one of my top five Redman joints for real, and so I gave it to Red on that one. I'll Be That is that Eric Sermon?
That's a really good question. You know, off top, it sounds like it's Rockwilder, but it could
Yeah,
be
like
neither. Yeah,
Rockwilder or Eric, one of the
yeah.
two. Yeah, but that joint just it goes so hard. I love
And the
it.
video was great. You know. Yeah.
Yeah, the video was great for sure. Next up was All I Need, the RZA mix, the album mix versus How High, the Green Eyed Bandit mix. It's interesting because both of these songs have at least two very popular versions,
Yeah.
and I think that they're probably relatively polarizing in terms of which you know I'm sure people like both, but I would venture to say that most people have a distinct favorite.
Hmm.
Um, you know, um, and so which versions are your favorite of each record?
I was surprised to hear the RZA version of All I Need. And when I'm alone, when I'm in, when I'm in the car, I just love the way he mixed that, and it just has that grimy feel to it. So I'll lean that one. But obviously, if you're having a tender moment with a significant other, you got to go with the Puff Daddy. The famous one that we've often seen in these recent performances. And on the flip to that, I go with the other Eric Sermon mix of How High, um, but not as I'm not as definitive on that. I just kind of prefer the beat. What about you?
This is a classic case where you and I like are opposites.
Yep.
I love the puffy like you're all I need to get by remix just like just maybe it was I don't know you could is more up tempo, you could dance to it more in a club, it may be the same BPMs but it sounds like it's a bit more up tempo and I don't know, maybe it's more R&B, maybe that's why I like it more. And the How High, uh, man, just Eric Sermon's bass is so deep and rumbling.
In this version, in the Green Eyed Bandit mix.
Yeah, on
Yeah.
the version, like, and it's the one that was on the soundtrack. It's the one that was on the Def Jam compilation. Remember the four
The
disc set?
Oh, word, yeah.
Yeah, so that's the one that really hits me. So I gave it to How High because, but had it been the All I Need Puff version, I would have given it
That on it.
to Meth.
And I just thought, how often in concert does Meth get to perform that version? And I don't know the answer. Maybe he does, but I like that. And yeah, shout out to Method Man's Grammy winning song. And I went Meth on that one for reasons that stated. So the last official round, and you and I think called it in our scorecard because we're like, what else is left? Um, and it was Tonight's the Night versus Method Man. Um, and tell me how you kind of approach this one.
Again, it's the record, man. For me, it ended it with the record, and uh, you know, Tonight's the Night is just another one of those classic Redman songs. Really great sample. One of my, probably completes the top five or top four for me. And I love Method Man because you know Meth was always my favorite rapper in Wu, and this
Mm,
his solo record and his real standout and introduction and great branding, the whole nine. And so I think they played that first, and I had thought I was scored as Meth, but when I heard Tonight's the Night, um, you know, this is one where it's really about the track for me
yeah.
because I think the vocal performances for both are just standout, and but I just like the track better for Tonight's the Night.
Yeah, and Scratch did what I saw years ago. I was blown away. DJ Neil Armstrong used to do those sample mixes, and he would do compilations of that. And I think it's a Hall and Oates sample. Am I right for Method Man? And to have him do that, you just knew it was coming. And I went Meth, and you and I love to disagree. So, yeah.
No, we don't.
So
uh,
there was some bonus round stuff too.
yeah, bonus rounds. I don't know that we really scored this, but there was some really some cool moments that came out. He played like a couple of Redman joints, "The Goodness" and "Let's Get Dirty," and then he played AO, which is one of my favorite records of theirs collectively. But this is when it got really, really exciting in terms of like the guests coming out. So K Solo came out, did My Big Brother, and he sounds exactly the same. It's
Yeah.
crazy how he sounds. Voice is still rugged and raw. And then, for me, like I said, the highlight of the night when EPMD came out and they all did Headbanger together.
Yeah.
That was just that just blew me away, man. Really, really loved that. And then Scratch, wanted to make sure that Eric and Parrish got the platform too, right?
Yeah.
These are guys who might not get a versus, so he wanted to give them their flowers. And so what you're saying was a great way to celebrate them. And then it ended with
Triumph and the Rock Wilder, and it was great to see Rock Wilder get some moments too. I can't remember if it was Red or Method. I think it was Red that really gave him shine and reminded everyone that that song was named after the producer. And it was a few years ago. You and I drove out to Eric Sermon's studio in Long Island, and Parrish happened to be there. It was one of my favorite moments in recent years. And I shout out to you because you didn't prepare EPMD questions, but in a supernatural freestyle, pun intended, you got a great interview with EPMD that we did not expect. And that day there was many different rooms going on there, and there was a lot of talented and, historic artists working that day. But we said, what's up to Rock Wilder? And, in that whole era, you and I talked about year 2000, not that long ago, when guys were walking away from samples and you had your Swizz Beats and you had your Neptunes. I always liked Rock Wilder. I thought his knock was really dope. And I mean, his namesake song is his best. So that was really cool to see because he's part of the Gilla House Redman camp. And, they continue to work together to this day. Also, Socrates, who got a shout out at the end. So, yeah, it was really cool. And the other thing I want to say, though, is you mentioned K Solo, and K Solo's name came up more than usual in the last few weeks in remembering DMX. And the history there isn't pretty because, it's two guys debating over who came up with the Letterman style and the Spellbound style. And so for K Solo to get a moment in time, strictly for his merits, strictly for two great verses that he had, and watch him kind of carpe diem that moment, um, I I like that on a lot of levels.
yeah, the obvious reference, DMX, so DMX and Black Rob, like, played a significant part in tonight's
Yeah.
verses. Scratch celebrated them before. Um, Red and Mess shouted them out. They did moments of silence for them a couple times. Like they were big, and Versus, Swizz and Tim have talked a lot about it being a platform to give these artists who have put in a lot of time and years their flowers while they're here. And that resonates even more deeply after a week where, a 2 week period where we lost Rob and DMX. And fortunately, DMX was able to have that platform, as you noted, last summer. And it's something that wasn't lost on Redman and Method Man tonight. They openly said it a number of times, and so it was cool at the end that they actually showered them with roses. They gave them their flowers. So you know, uh, we scored it, and our own personal scores, and we love the debate. We love the competition, but this was definitely a celebration of both phenomenal MCs, and I think one of the best celebrations yet. You and I talked about this, I think, after the third verses, and you were skeptical as to how long it could continue. And I thought there was going to be a lot more, but I didn't think there would be as much as there has been. But for us to get some of the best ones yet with Ray and Ghost, and now this late in the cycle is really, really encouraging. And like seeing the production value that's been dedicated to it with Triller, and like the moves that they're making with Peloton and things like that, man, I'm just like, I'm happy for this
Yeah.
hip hop for this franchise.
Yeah, I mean, very well said. And this still felt like the same verses that it started out as. It didn't feel overly corporate. I do think there was a little bit of pressure to fill the time and take it straight to 11 o'clock. But I wanted to watch it all for the sake of this conversation. I think Meth, wanted to head out, and I have to imagine if you haven't performed in over a year like this, that's got to be taxing on the body, no matter how physically fit you are.
Yeah,
But I thought it was a really good moment, and I like the roses a lot.
for sure, for sure. So I know we got a couple other things to talk about. First is Black Rob. You wanna talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, um, last what was it, Saturday? We got word that Rob had passed away, Robert Ross, and it was odd enough because in the last month we mentioned him on What's the Headline and talking about the year 2000 and what a massive record Whoa was. But just to take it one step further, I've been a longtime fan of Black Rob for over 20 years, and that album is one of my gems in the Bad Boy catalog. Life Story. And it's funny because you and I, as we've alluded to here, send each other songs of the day pretty much daily. And I Dare You was one of my joints not that long ago. I listened to that album a lot. And Rob was a product of, if I'm not mistaken, East Harlem, definitely Uptown. And he was a talented MC with real hip hop roots, which I think was very necessary for Bad Boy in the late 90s and 2000s, when people were trying to figure out what it would look like after Mace eventually left, and after Biggie had passed and Craig Mack left. Um, but what's interesting, and I have to say I never realized this until this week. Rob's kind of debut on Wax was on the Crew album, The Dirty 30, which I didn't realize. We talk about Def Jam in the mid 90s. That's a sleeper album, of some really talented dudes. And Rob appeared on the song Nothing But on the album. And around that time, he had already signed to Bad Boy, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around 96 or 7, but started appearing on remixes by Total and 112, and eventually, gets his moment on No Way Out. And then by 2000, as the Locks have left and everything else, he gets his moment. And I look at the landscape of hip hop, and I feel like Black Rob, represented a bridge between your kind of hardcore hip hop in the East Coast of the mid 90s, your like Group Homes or your Smith and Wessons, or you can pick any borough and find that kind of rap, and your 50 Cents, where he was still making true hip hop. But they did, and shout out to Puff for this, and his team, they did find a way to make it catchy. And I think Woe was emblematic of that. And I look at that record, and Buck Wild produced it from DITC, and that I think was a launching pad for him to go on and do other records for Jay-Z, or yeah, Jay and 50 and Game and other people. And even after that, Rob, a lot of people really liked his second album. um and in recent years, Rob was very active, but what I think we learned and probably didn't do enough about is his health was in jeopardy. Rob suffered something like 4 strokes over 5 years. He and what brought awareness to him recently was when DMX passed, a video was released of Rob in a hospital bed talking about it. And I don't want to go into too much detail, but his health didn't look good. And now to get the news a week later that he had passed at 52 years old, it's just tragic. And I think we've got to use all of this stuff. I mean, on and on and on, of the people we've lost in recent years, to take better care of ourselves and each other. And yeah, I that kind of was a gut punch.
Yeah, man, for sure. I was at one of my son's baseball games when you hit me with the news, and there have been so many conflicting reports about his health. Like, he had been in the hospital a week ago, like you said, and then he was released, and it seemed like he was okay. And
Yeah.
to get that news, especially just a week after Exit Pass, was really tough. I was driving back and listening to the radio, and it may have been DJ Scratch, I can't remember, but somebody on Power 105 was playing a Black Rob set. Obviously, Whoa is the track that people remember, but he put together like a 25-minute set that was just amazing, and just a testament to the impact that he had, the records that he had, and hearing it in New York on that radio was a reminder of just how important he was in that era. And so rest in peace to him. And condolences to his family and all the fans and supporters of Black Rob.
For sure.
So on a higher note, last week was an amazing week for Nas. Nas has been on a real run in 2021. He got his first Grammy ever for King's Disease, Album of the Year, Rap Album of the Year, just last month, which was phenomenal. And now Coinbase, which is an app that allows people to buy and sell cryptocurrencies. I think it's up to 50 cryptocurrencies. People know Bitcoin, but there's Ethereum and Monero and several others. And Coinbase allows people to do that with ease. And they just went public after I think 7 years in business, and the valuation was something like $90 billion. And Nas, through his Queensbridge Venture Partners fund, invested in them. And typically, they invest between $100,000 and $500,000 in their investments. And Queensbridge didn't confirm how much, but they did confirm that it was within their typical range, and it was at the $10 million valuation. So, in doing the math, 10 million versus 100 billion. It is projected that Nas made at least $40 million and potentially as high as $206 million from that investment. Even if it's 40, that's $40 million, for Nas. And so I think that and he tweeted, long crypto forever, in sickness and in health. So I think it's really noteworthy and amazing to see how Nas has built his wealth. You got like Puff, Jay, and Diddy, who've really used their name and likeness to amass their wealth. So Jay and Puff use their clout to really push alcohol and other products and establish that cool factor. And it's clothing as well. Both did clothing. Jay obviously with Rock Nation. Puff with Revolt. All of that has been baked around their cool. Same thing with Dr. Dre with Beats. It's all been really driven by who they were as artists, as personalities to the culture. Nas, on the other hand, has invested in Coinbase. He's invested in Dropbox, FanDuel, Lyft. Like he's invested in some amazing, amazing entities.
Ring doorbell. I mean, you see
Ring,
them.
yeah, Ring.
And then the what is it called? The Amazon, was it Pill Pack?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
direct,
So a ton of things, right? And so, not to get into his podcast, but those investments probably add up to, 3, 4, $500 million. And so Nas has quietly put himself in that same conversation, but in a very, very different way. And in a lot of ways, it's classic Nas, right? Nas has always been supremely gifted, supremely talented, but
in the cut.
but relatively quiet about it, humble, and so to see him, get rewarded through that, and shout out to Anthony Saleh too, who is his business partner, who is driving a lot of those investments. It's amazing, and it's a great example to show that wealth can be built a lot of different ways. You can own your own assets. You can invest in other people's assets. But investing, whether in yourself or in someone else, is the key. And so, I thought that was great and really noteworthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that they're taking chances and doing things that, and that's not to discredit, any liquor, apparel, company otherwise, but the fact that Nas's name, yesterday I looked at a Ring doorbell, and my association in my mind for the last 5 or 6 years has been Nas. And I love that because it's only through reading, articles on AFH or Forbes or Business Insider that we even know that. And yeah, I mean, he is a shy mogul.
Yeah. And quick hits, on the music side, Conway the Machine released an album that I think is one of Conway's best. You know, one of my favorite of 2021 for sure, La Maquina. We put a song called Scatterbrain on our playlist a couple weeks ago. It's featuring JID and Ludacris. It's really interesting because it's a very different kind of beat than Conway would typically do, and a very different kind of flow as well. Um, and he flips his flow differently, but it's still Conway. He's not selling out, but like really changing up his flow in a way that only elite MCs can do. You know, you see Busta Rhymes doing that, you see Jay doing that, you see Kendrick doing that. You know, so to see Conway flipping his style that radically and still sounding great was pretty dope to me. Another standout cut for me is 200 Pies with 2 Chainz, produced by The Alchemist. This is one of my favorite Alchemist beats, and Alchemist has just been on a tear
Yeah.
the last couple of years for sure, but like really for the last several years. I just did an Alchemist playlist. It's got nearly 40 songs on it, and that guy is he's one of my favorite producers. Like, you know, just you know, no cap. Well, I'll say he's one of my favorite producers.
Yeah.
And there's a couple other things.
What I like on that album is, I mean, he, not to cut you off, but he at one point asserts himself that, you know, West Side Gun is getting all this credit, is kind of like the player coach, and Benny's really run away with, you know, several, as we've recently talked about, album of the year contenders. And Conway, you know, reminds everyone that, like, you know, I forget the lyric, but that, like, I ain't one of the, you know, illest. And this album was a statement for him of just how much he means. And it's fun to see how all three of these guys have evolved so much since 2019.
Absolutely, absolutely. And on the last note, you know, you and I often would write things about things being bigger than hip hop, you know, and we had a bigger than hip hop moment today in that Derek Chauvin, the police officer who killed George Floyd, was convicted of second, third degree murder and manslaughter. And it's so rare to see this happen, um, where police officers are convicted generally, especially when the victims are Black or African American. And so, you know, that is something that is noteworthy, and, you know, justice has been served. It's hard to, you know, even think about justice when a man has lost his life, but for
Yeah,
that,
father.
yeah,
Yeah,
for that to be recognized is powerful, and I think starting toward healing for a lot of people. You know, there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of, you know, Breonna Taylor's, you know, killers are still not even been tried. You know, there's a lot to do, but that is a noteworthy milestone when it comes to justice for George Floyd.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, tonight was one for celebrating. Hip hop got a major win. Did we tell you the scores? We didn't tell you the scores, did we? So for me, I had it at 11-15, and people
Hmm.
at home going to be like, "Wait, that was only, you know, 20
Yeah.
rounds." But because of my ties, it sorted out 11-15. And if you took the ties away, it might have been a dead draw. But
Yeah.
because of the way the ties fell for me, I had it Redman 15, Method Man 11.
Word. I had, and it's funny because our numbers aren't even the same. Um, I had Method Man 11, Redman 10, which is crazy, and again, a testament to how close these records were. So yeah, man, we even got different winners.
So you got Meth, I got Red. Wow.
Yep. Which, if you had, you know, going into it, I was like, I don't know. So it wasn't until I tallied that I even realized. But great moment for hip hop. Um, what's your song of the week, man?
My song of the week is 200 Pies, man. Like
Mm,
I played that song over and over and over again. Like 2 Chainz snapped. Like if people don't start like taking 2 Chainz seriously as a lyricist, that dude snaps. And like he'll snap with anybody. Like, and he killed it over an Alchemist beat.
Yeah.
Man, you know, so yeah, that's my joint.
I like that. He's a feature sniper lately. So today, an album dropped that Pete Rock tweeted about. I didn't realize it was coming out. The Hour of Khrysis by Khrysis, part of the Jamla family, Grammy-winning producer, and it is a stacked album. So real quick, you know, he's got Busta and Pharaoh on a joint together. He's got Evidence on here. He's got Geechee Suede from Camp Low on here. Rock, Rhapsody, Dell, on and on and on. Chi Ali, Evidence, Problem. But my joint is from one of my favorite groups of all time, De La Soul. They feature on it. It's called Mr. Big Mouth Part 2. And it makes reference to a lot of classics, not the De La I expected, not the Khrysis I expected, but this whole album knocks, and that is my joint.
Oh yeah, that sounds like it's gonna be a major addition to the playlist. So
Yeah, start your day tomorrow with this album, man.
it's dope. All right, man. Well, always a pleasure.
Likewise, until we do it again.
All right. Peace.
Peace.